Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Thunderstruck, our look back at the greatest matches of Jushin Thunder Liger, as picked by each and every unique standalone guest of this series. And I'm very excited about this week's guest. She is a prolific writer for with Spandex on Uproxx.com, for DeadlockPW.com, MindGames.LimitedRun.com, and maybe more places that I'm not aware of. She also has one of my favorite Twitter handles, talking about wrestling. She is Emily Pratt. Emily, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Yes. Did I miss anything, by the way?
No, that's it. I was right. My first thing for Deadlock was published today, so I'm very flattered.
Yeah, I just saw it. It's about the fashions inspired by deathmatch wrestling. I thought it was a really good piece.
Thank you.
So, Emily, for people who may not be aware of you, like, what was your start as a fan of professional wrestling? And then maybe how did it migrate into Japanese wrestling? And how did you get involved with becoming a writer about professional wrestling?
Well, I started watching pro wrestling when I was a kid. I think I saw it at like a friend's house after soccer practice, and we would watch like mostly the like early 2000s SmackDown, and we were big marks for Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio. And then I got out of it when I was a little older, and WWE got they were already like very sexist when I was watching it, but then I started to they got worse, and I connected that to myself in my brain as I got older. So I was like, oh wait, that's me. That they're treating this way as well. And I stopped watching wrestling. I didn't know anybody who watched indie wrestling or anything, so I didn't really know about the options besides WWE. And then later, I think somebody just showed me a video of something going on with the Shield that I thought was cool. And I started looking at what was going on with wrestling, and I got into Japanese wrestling, looking into what other Eddie Guerrero stuff I had not seen before, out of nostalgia for my favorite childhood wrestler, and that was definitely my first exposure to Jushin Liger of junior heavyweight wrestling, because the first New Japan I saw was Eddie Guerrero in Best of the Super Juniors, and then I got into other Japanese wrestling through just I guess I just looked up what's happening. Oh, Shinsuke Nakamura is really cool, and just became very obsessed with it and looked at other companies too. As for writing about wrestling, I was trying to work in theater, and that internship working for a local arts website. And one time I got them to let me write about a local indie wrestling show. And then I moved to California and met some of the people who work with Spandex, and mentioned that I had written about wrestling in addition to writing about other things. And they hired me on for a trial month, and then hired me on. Well, I guess I'm not a staff. I'm a freelancer, contributes to them. But now I've been there for almost over a year and a half now, and ended up branching out and writing about wrestling for other places, and that just really that's just it's a lot of what I do now. So that's how that all came about.
Well, one thing I want to say, what I enjoy about your writing is that it's a refreshing kind of voice in wrestling discourse, because a lot of the perspectives that we talked about when wrestling is discussed from fans is from a male perspective. And you brought up this whole idea of you got turned off by WWE programming because of the misogyny and like sexism that exists in like the Attitude Era, which, and I totally agree with you about that. So for me, like reading your writing, whether it's on Twitter or it's in your magazines, your articles for the different websites you write for, it's like there's this really different perspective that I feel I can learn from as a man. Like, okay, maybe I didn't see that angle. Like I could recognize blatant like sexism and misogyny that exists in professional wrestling throughout its history, but maybe there's this aspect here. Oh, I didn't realize that maybe women might have a problem with that. So I really appreciate that perspective from someone like you, Emily.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think it seems like there is kind of something going on with people who are interested in like reading wrestling blogs and podcasts. Is I think people are saying like, I mean, just like there's been more of a push for, I guess, different. This is how I'm just like, what's a good way to say this that isn't dumb? But yeah, it seems like there's like a very strong community of like female fans and I guess fans who haven't been catered to as much by wrestling, especially like US wrestling, that are like pretty vocal now, which is it's cool to see like different how people look at different things in wrestling, because I think like you respond to wrestling on such like a gut level that people with different life experiences sometimes have just way different ways of responding to it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm all for like trying to discover like, new female voices in like, wrestling, journalism, writing, and as well as people of color. I myself, I'm Asian,
Yeah.
so like I bring a unique perspective to it. I think different from like a lot of the people who are established writers in wrestling. They tend to be white males, like myself and like Wei Ting over at postwrestling.com. We're like, when we do a show together, we make a point of like, oh, we're two Asian guys talk about wrestling. It's really interesting. You don't really hear that. Usually it's predominantly a white male voice on doing wrestling podcasts. So here we are, like I'm a Korean, Canadian, Asian male, like who lives in Japan, talking with a younger woman who writes about wrestling from a very unique perspective, like much different from mine, because I'm older, and I think I have this kind of like my fandom kind of, colors my perception of wrestling. As you're younger than me as well, so your perception of wrestling, your history as a fan is different than mine. So I think that's always interesting to have those kinds of discourses, like, and have them recorded and have them disseminated to a larger audience.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about Jushin Thunder Liger. So you mentioned like your fandom of when Eddie Guerrero made you seek out his matches that he had in Japan, in New Japan Pro Wrestling as a junior heavyweight. He was, of course, the second incarnation of the Black Tiger gimmick, and he did a lot of work with people like Jushin Thunder Liger, El Samurai, Shinjiro Otani, Koji Kanemoto, Wild Pegasus, Dean Malenko, Fit Finley, and people like that. So, Liger specifically, what was your first match that you saw with Liger that you remember vividly?
Oh, that's a great question. I should have figured that out before. I think it must have been like, see, that I really remember vividly. I'm gonna look up like what it is, like this, because I remember what the match is, but I don't remember like what show it was from. It was from the one I really remember is from, I think, the first Super J Cup.
The 1994 one?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was, okay, yeah, it was the final with the Liger versus Hayabusa, because I guess just because that was like so unique. So I had seen a bunch of, I guess both them being like the kind of lucha influenced, but also like very Japanese, like the Japanese junior heavyweights of that time with like the costumes and the masks. So it like looked really different. And then it was just a really cool match. Like one of just a really exciting one of that era. I think that was the first one that I thought was really cool with Liger in it.
Yeah, that is a memorable match. I do believe, I could correct me if I'm wrong, anyone out there, but I do believe that's like their only time they've had a singles match against each other, because I think Liger was trying to get Hayabusa to leave FMW, which is where his home promotion was, to come join New Japan, but Hayabusa just didn't want to leave. He was very loyal to FMW, and I think, as far as I recall, this created a big rift between Liger and Hayabusa, because apparently they were friends beforehand, and then they did the Super J Cup '94. They had the match, and that's a really great match. I can understand why that would stick out in your memory. And then, yeah, but he didn't want to leave FMW, so then it created this big strain, so they never really interacted after that. But hopefully they patched things up before, Hayabusa's tragic accident and, like death recently. So I'm hoping that's what happened. But that's a great starting point for someone to get into Jushin Thunder Liger. For me, actually, this match that you picked would be one of the earliest matches that I ever saw Jushin Thunder Liger in, where I was like, who is this guy? It was the match prior to this. This is the rematch of these two guys that you're going to talk. I'm going to let you introduce it. So what match did you pick, Emily, to talk about with me on Thunderstruck today?
I picked Jushin Thunder Liger versus Flyin Brian Pillman for the WCW Light Heavyweight Championship at Superbrawl 1992.
Yeah, so this is from February 29th, 1992, from, I believe, the Mecca Arena in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And apparently the attendance was about 5,000 people, according to Cage Match. And our commentators, this is one of my favorite commentating teams, is Jim Ross and Jesse the Body Ventura. I think these two had an amazing chemistry with one another. And we'll talk about their commentary throughout the course of me discussing the match with you. The ring announcer, one of my favorites, Gary Michael Capetta. Let's just quickly, what do you think about the setup here in WCW and like the kind of the atmosphere created by the fans in attendance?
The atmosphere is, I think it's like, it's okay. It's like what you would expect for an opening, like cruiserweight or light heavyweight championship match. Like even now on like so many times WWE pay-per-views open with those, and it's always like, even though it's like people know the characters and stuff, like pretty chill crowd at the beginning, and then they warm up like halfway through when they start doing crazier stuff. And I don't know, it's a better atmosphere towards, well, I guess everything about how they treat Liger is like kind of better than a lot of other like Japanese or Mexican wrestlers in the US back in the day. So that's good. So overall, I think this is kind of like the atmosphere that you would expect for this match.
I think so. I would even say that maybe this match is a little bit better received than what you would see in most junior heavyweight, cruiserweight title matches in the United States or in Canada or really any kind of Western audience. I do think maybe UK fans are a bit more responsive to like this kind of style of wrestling, because a lot of their top stars are like smaller and do a lot more high flying stuff. So Pillman, we start the match, and of course you can find this match on the WWE Network. Don't try to find it on New Japan World; it won't be on there, of course, because the WWE owns the rights to all the WCW footage. Pillman comes out first, and he gets a big response from the crowd. He's been in WCW for a while at this point. He's been pushed as a top guy in the company. Liger comes out second. He is the current WCW light heavyweight champion. He defeated Brian Pillman earlier on Christmas Day in 1991 at the Omni in Atlanta. And I did think that Liger got a bit of a response because he had been doing some matches to set up the rematch with Pillman. He had the match at the Omni prior to this. But like definitely Pillman is the bigger star in this match.
Yeah, definitely.
From here, the match starts with both guys trading arm locks with each other, and they're dodging each other by doing leapfrogs and things like that. It's a pretty standard opening to a wrestling match. Pillman's strategy is clearly to mat wrestle with Liger to kind of ground him, and this is mentioned by both Jesse Ventura and Jim Ross on commentary. Emily.
Yeah. Yeah, the way they present these guys, I think, is really it's I like the way that they present them. It's like very I think as like sports based as you can get for like junior heavyweight wrestling, because they're talking about, I mean, even though Liger, like Jesse Ventura compares Liger to the Predator as if the Predator is real and Jesse Ventura fought the Predator in real life. They also are like, oh, he is a great amateur wrestler too. So I think they do a good job of presenting this as like two very similar athletes, even though they look very different.
Yeah, Jesse mentioning like that he fought the Predator like it was a real fight or something like that. He conveniently forgot to mention that he was killed by the Predator, but like, he's a wrestler. He can't mention that he got beat. So definitely it's an interesting contrast, isn't it? Like with Pillman, you can see it because he used to play football and like he was trained by the Hart family, so you can like you can put it out there like, oh, he's a great amateur wrestler. He's doing a real sports background with him. With Liger, he's dressed like a Power Ranger, right? So it's, oh yeah, this guy's a great amateur wrestler too. Why is he dressed like, a cartoon character? I actually love that kind of like contrast with what is behind Liger, Keiichi Yamada, and what is presented as like this gimmick, this like really amazing, colorful gimmick that has appeared in Japanese anime, but because Keiichi Yamada is such a great wrestler that you have to take him seriously. Like it now becomes like this costume, this image is now like goes hand in hand with like amazing wrestling and not with like some cartoon character that fights giant monsters.
Mm-hmm.
So from here, Pillman picks up the pace with a head scissors takedown, a drop kick, and a sort of basement drop kick through the ropes that sends Liger crashing into the barrier. Referee Mike Atkins prevents Pillman from going to the top rope, though, so he won't be able to do like a big dive. But I think it's okay. You don't have to do it necessarily within the first 5 minutes of the match. Liger later regains the advantage with a top rope moonsault, a drop kick that sends Pillman to the floor, and psychs out Pillman by doing a rebound handstand backwards flip. And I thought, wow, this is like early, like Liger is very flippy as opposed to like post 96, post brain surgery Liger that we see where he becomes more of a technical wrestler. And I don't know, like if you had seen like or noticed the contrast between the two versions of Liger, like post brain tumor surgery and post brain tumor surgery.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear. Like this is the most high flying era of Liger, definitely. Like it's pretty noticeable. But I think there's like you don't I don't know why I never put together like when. I always forget like when he had the surgery, so I was like, oh, he got older. I always forget when he had the surgery. But yeah, this is like, it's looking at Liger, I never think of him as being young, even though he is like very young here. I always like iconic masked wrestlers are just like, for some reason, even though I know that they are real people, they're always like ageless to me until I see part of their face. Like you can even like Stalker Hollywood, like Hollywood Stalker Ichikawa to me is like 400 years old, even though it's like he's like 44 and is just wearing makeup. It's weird to me. I don't know why my brain does this. But anyway, this is clearly like young prime athlete Liger here.
Yeah, I think like this is where like maybe our point of views are very different, because I always think of like guys like Stalker Ichikawa and Liger and like maybe like, for example, Dr. Wagner Jr., if we're using a lucha example, like they, with their masks on, I think they must be still in like their early or mid 30s, but no, they're like in their 50s. And once the masks come off, it's like, okay, like when Liger wears his broadcasting mask, where it's not the full face mask, and you can see his eyes and you can see his mouth. It's like, okay, he's probably a granddad by now.
Yeah,
he has to be, and it shows. But when he's wearing the full bodysuit and he's wearing the full face mask, it's like, I don't know how old he is. I'm just taking back to like 1994, and that's like, okay, he's the Liger of 94, 95, 96, which is like my prime years for liking Liger. So it's interesting that you think of them as like eternally old, and I'm looking at him as eternally young. So it's really interesting contrast to the way our brains think about things like that. But from here, like this really gets the crowd fired up. All these like hot move sequences from Liger, so you can tell like the crowd is really warming up to Jushin Liger, because they're like, I really think that this is like for them, wow, I've never seen this kind of wrestling before. I've never seen a guy who looks like this do these kinds of things. I'm totally getting into this.
yeah. I think that's when he breaks out the moonsault and stuff. Definitely pops the crowd. And it's like, well, maybe you don't get what this costume is, but it's cool to see a flip like that. So they're into him now.
Definitely, like for me, when I saw him do the backwards handstand backflip, I'm like, well, okay, like you've never seen that from him. You haven't seen that from him for a long time. So it popped me, and I've been following Liger for a long time. From here, though, Brian Pillman slows it down with a grounded abdominal stretch, which he then transitions into a head scissor. Liger escapes and tries for the surfboard several times, but Pillman is able to escape here. I think, for me, like these surfboard attempts, if they were attempted in front of a Japanese audience, if they were done at Korakuen Hall, you would have got a much different response, because those fans would have been conditioned to know like this is one of Liger's signature spots. But for the crowd in Milwaukee, they're not really responding as well, which I'm not saying it hurts the match, but for me, it's like it's a real contrast to like how the American audience at that time would respond to like Liger's moves versus like the Japanese audience at the time, Emily.
Yeah, definitely. It's I guess I noticed that more with when like today, when maybe you'll see like some American indie guys go over to Japan, and it's like people's first time seeing stuff. It's always interesting to see how people respond differently. And now I think if it's like a Japanese guy or maybe a better known luchador going over to the US, people have seen them, and so they react very dramatically to stuff like the Romero special. But here it's just like it's like another move. Some people probably thought it was pretty cool. Not a big deal to them.
No, it's not. But you did bring up a great point that like in 2019, I think a lot of Western audiences are far more familiar with Japanese talent and like their signature moves, and it will respond accordingly versus like maybe fans in Japan who aren't familiar with like a lot of the American wrestlers these days, which is really strange to say, because like it was kind of the opposite way back in the 80s and the 90s. I feel like you get a lot of coverage of American wrestling in like places like what I think was Shupro was still running back then, and the other like Tokyo Sports and other newspapers, magazines that covered the wide world of wrestling for Japanese viewers and stuff, that they would cover like, oh, these are the signature moves of this wrestler, this wrestler, this wrestler from America. And then when they came over to Japan, they do the moves. They were like, the Japanese audience like, okay, I know who that is. Whereas even now with like streaming technology and the such, maybe there's a lot of people who aren't familiar with the first time they see someone like Will Ospreay, for example, or the first time they see Robbie Eagles in New Japan, or if, I'm trying to think like, even like a good recent example like in Dragon Gate would have been Pac. Like when he came back after his run in the WB, there was a huge turnover from the time he left Dragon Gate and the time he came back. There was a lot of people who weren't familiar with him because he looked so different. And also like his movesets, like I think his first maybe 2 or 3 matches, people weren't responding to these things that Pac is well known for because they don't remember him. And I feel there's a huge turnover every year with the fans in Dragon Gate. But after a while, they got educated. Okay, these are his signature moves, so this is what we're going to pop for. We're going to respond to when Pac does these moves. But it wasn't the case, which is a really interesting like shift in tone from like who is more familiar with who now. Like Japanese fans are more familiar with Japanese talent and only for the most part, and the American, UK, Canadian audience is really only familiar with is more familiar with Japanese talent now because of streaming technology.
Yeah, I think so. Is there less do you think is there like less awareness of or coverage of like American wrestling or non-Japanese wrestling in Japan now than there was or than there used to be?
I think WWE is the only thing that really is broadcast here to a large extent. Like they have a license with I think it's J Sky Sports, which is a cable network that you can order to watch sports on, including the WWE. It's interesting in Japan, like WWE fans only like WWE wrestling. So the Japanese WWE fans don't watch New Japan Pro Wrestling. They don't watch All Japan or Dragon Gate or any of the Joshi. They only watch WWE. They're familiar with like when Kenta signed, they're familiar with who Kenta is, but they're responding to the fact, they're cheering for the fact that he's joined the WWE. They're responding to the fact that Kairi Sane joined the WWE, that Io Shirai joined the WWE. Like they might not have known who they were or followed them in their home promotions in Japan. And like a lot of the Japanese fans of New Japan Pro Wrestling or other promotions don't really follow the WWE, but they might read about them in Weekly Pro Wrestling, which covers the WWE in the back of the magazine. So usually all the coverage of American wrestling is done in the back of the magazine. So you'll follow them. And of course, they get more coverage now because of people like, Hideo Itami and Shinsuke Nakamura and Asuka and Kairi Sane and Io Shirai going over there. But no, it's still dominated. Like all the press is dominated towards Japanese promotions, in particular, of course, New Japan Pro Wrestling. But getting back to the match, Pillman catches Liger with a crucifix, but only gets a 2 with that. Liger goes for a modified sunset flip, a 2 count. Pillman hits a great backdrop driver, a 2 count. Pillman hits the turnbuckle with his left leg, and Liger starts to work it over, including applying a figure 4. So you had this really hot sequence of like pinfall attempt, but then Liger capitalizes on the mistake Pillman makes and just starts working over his leg, which I thought that's some really great ring psychology happening in this match at this point.
Yeah, it's like a very, very exciting change of pace there, and looks very painful. Yeah,
it was a good figure 4. I mean,
figure 4.
One thing I really enjoyed while they're in the figure 4, they start slapping each other in the face really hard. I thought, oh, that's really, I think it just raises the intensity level when you don't just have the guy in the figure 4, but the person in the figure 4, pops up and just like starts yelling at his opponent, or they just like start hitting each other really hard. For me, that really fires me up when I see a figure 4 leg lock spot.
Yeah, you always love to see people doing some additional like hitting and submission moves. Definitely.
Yeah, from here, they roll into the ropes, which prompts the hold to be broken. Liger continues to work over the left leg of Brian Pillman. Pillman is able to fire back by hitting an enziguri, but Liger recovers very quickly from that. We get a big USA chance, which just reminded me of how good old wrestling jiganism is in 1992. You know what's funny? I mentioned this on a previous episode. Like even in Canada, like sometimes you would get like with a wrestler like, for example, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, you would get USA chants in Canada, or another patriotic wrestler would chant USA, especially if there's a non-North American wrestler on the other side of the ring. But for me, I'm always like in Canada, like I'd be at like Maple Leaf Gardens or the Air Canada Center. I'd be like, why are you people chanting USA? We are Canadians. I don't
Wait, Canadian people were doing
Yes, Canadian people were doing this.
Wow.
Like,
I mean,
not
it's a fun chant, we have a good country name to chant, but that's really weird. I don't know why people from Canada would do that. But,
not me or my friends, because we're smart enough to realize we're not Americans. We shouldn't be chanting USA. If anything, we should be chanting for the other person, regardless if they're a heel or not. But like, I don't know. Like for me, like I find like Jigonism is kind of not dead, but it's like really like kind of lessened in its intensity in the 2000s now. Emily, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. It's like it pops up selectively. Like I don't know, they do I mean they just did last year with I mean Naito Jericho, they did a little like talking shit about Japan thing in that. And what happened in there's been some in WWE. I
It's
mean,
so
WWE and AEW, they've done some pretty dramatic, like national anthem type stuff at the beginning of shows that made some people uncomfortable because it was so dramatic and were like post Kaepernick NFL protest stuff. And so when like AEW started, it was like, well, nobody's making you have like a giant anthem thing at wrestling. It's not a real sport. But I mean, uh, especially AEW starting, it was like, wow, this is something that they're gonna do from day one, like at All In. But
I
yeah, it's definitely less than in like the early '90s, though. I think it's still there sometimes, but yeah,
I
definitely.
well, definitely I think less from the fans. I think there's less
Yeah,
times I hear the USA chants, especially if there's a foreigners. I think like people, fans in America are like, especially on an indie level, are very appreciative of like, oh wow, these people came over to the States to wrestle in front of us.
yeah,
We're gonna cheer them. I think in WWE you still get that because like that's kind of narratives they like to push with like
yeah.
these guys are from Europe, they're bad guys, so the
Hmm.
crowd's gonna respond with USA chants. But like as far as just as a quick comment to your AEW comment, like I can see why they would do the national anthem because I think that's probably a Cody thing because he's
Yeah.
really into like old school territorial wrestling stuff and I'm sure he's big into like the whole like yeah we gotta book things like my dad did like the heroic American hero versus the evil like foreign bad guys that we're at having a cold war with whether I'm sure once they get a Chinese wrestler they're gonna push the hell out of that guy as a bad guy. Mark my words, let me tell you that. We'll see if that comes true, but I'm guarantee you, Emily, if they have a Chinese character, he's gonna be like some trade official. That's his character, okay? And they're gonna have like I don't know, 10 guy fight him or something like that. Even though he's not American, he's actually a Canadian. But anyways, we're digressing here. Let's get back to the match here. Pillman recovers from the Pillman counters a tilt-a-whirl backbreaker attempt from Liger with a head scissors takedown. But Liger backdrops him over the top rope to the floor and follows up with a beautiful top rope somersault dive. Pillman recovers from this and hits a beautiful Air Pillman springboard clothesline. He then suplexes Liger over the top rope to the floor. And I want to go back to this Air Pillman. I fucking love this move. I remember the first time I saw it when he entered WCW. I think it was in a match against Lex Luger. And I thought, who is this guy and where has he been? Because even as a Canadian, I was not watching Stampede Wrestling, so I didn't see the stuff he did with Bruce Hart in the Bad Company tag team. So for me, Pillman is really up there with Liger as a pioneer of high flying wrestling, especially in the American scene.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like, I mean, there aren't that many matches like this on the American scene like before this. And this is not even like the era of I guess it's like the next era of like light heavyweight or cruiserweight wrestling in WCW that people really hype as like really introducing people to that. But this is definitely like very historically important, this feud that they have going on, which it seems like they recognize at the time.
Oh, I definitely think this is a very, very influential match on a lot of fans. I think it really prepares like the WCW fandom for when when Eric Bischoff does decide to like, okay, we're going to sign a lot of like the luchadors and we're going to sign a lot of the talent from Japan, like Ultimo Dragon and bring in junior heavyweights, via the relationship that they have with New Japan Pro Wrestling. Pillman follows up. So Liger's on the floor. Pillman follows up with a top rope crossbody block. Pillman misses a dive and hits the guardrail. Liger throws Pillman back into the ring and goes off the top rope, but Pillman catches him with a beautiful midair dropkick that like he's actually quite famous for doing on a lot of people, not just Liger. Pillman goes to the top and Liger counters with his own midair dropkick. So you're gonna see like these two guys doing these mirror spots against each other. And at the time during this match, when I first watched it, I was like, oh my god, like okay, Pillman's perfect opponent for like his high flying style is Jushin Liger. And Liger's at that time, I didn't know about the other guys in Japan, but like at that time, I was like Pillman's like this guy's got to be his best opponent for the high flying stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. They look really evenly matched here. Look like very good, very good fit as rivals.
From here, Pillman hits a power slam, only gets a 2 count. Liger hits a German suplex with a bridge. It's not too common you see him doing like a German suplex. He only gets a 2 with that, unfortunately for him. Pillman blocks a superplex and sends Liger face first to the mat and hits Liger with a crossbody block for a big 2 count. At this point, I gotta say this is probably what I call the crescendo of the match. Like the crowd is electric for this match, and like they're like living and dying from every big move that these two are doing against each other, Emily.
Yeah, they definitely, this is, I say like the climax because I think of it like like a movie or something. Yeah, they have clearly like set this up really well. People are really excited. They're into everything that they're putting out there.
From here, Liger hits a powerbomb for a big 2 count, and I got to think that most of the fans in WCW were only used to seeing like guys like Sid Vicious and Big Van Vader do powerbombs, so it must have been interesting for them seeing like a lighter guy, a smaller guy doing a powerbomb. Yeah. Probably a better one. Well, I can't say that. I like Sid's powerbomb. I like Vader's powerbomb. So, but a kind of variation meant for like a smaller guy to hit. Like he did it differently than either Sid or Vader did. Pillman counters another powerbomb attempt with a weird-looking roll-up for a 2. It looked like he botched the move, but like he was able to recover. But thankfully, that wasn't the finish because it would have been a really odd-looking finish, Emily.
Yeah, that was on commentary they call it modified. This is the one. Yeah, this is the one they call like a modified Frankensteiner. It's like, oh yeah, I guess that was like a Rana into a roll up type thing, but it is weird. But like, I don't know, it works. It works.
It was fine. I'm surprised maybe like Jim Ross didn't bust out the bowling shoe reference, but I guess he wasn't going to do that with like someone as good a friend as he was with Brian Pillman. From here, Pillman goes for a DDT, only a 2 count. Both guys ram their heads against each other. And I thought, oh, that looks terrible, especially what we now know about like concussions. Like, yeah. Oh, I hope those guys were okay. Liger catches Pillman with a superplex for a big 2 count. Liger misses the diving headbutt, and Pillman rolls him up with the Japanese rolling clutch, and he gets the 1, 2, 3. And I really love this finish, even though it seemed a little abrupt. But I like thinking about it, I was like, you know what? It's a perfect way to end the match. He beat Liger with a mat kind of combo pinning move, and I thought this is really good stuff. He didn't have to hit him with a big, off the top rope move that he's known for, and I thought just a really great way to end the match. Your thoughts on the finish?
Yeah, I think it looks good. I think it. They're like so evenly matched. I think for the most part in this, or they look so competitive in this match that it's a cool ending because it's like it's both like athletically cool to see, and it's like whenever I see like one of those like leg clutch or like bridging pins, it always looks kind of like a smart strategic move. So I think it's like it fits kind of at the end where they hug, and it's like they are having this rivalry based on like who is the better athlete. So I think it's a very fitting ending, and it makes it makes Pillman look good, I think.
Yeah, so definitely the fans agree with you because there's a big standing ovation from the crowd for both guys. Pillman and Liger hug each other in a show of respect for each other. And of course, Pillman is now the new WCW light heavyweight champion. So overall, like my feelings, I thought this was a really excellent match and really ahead of its time. Like it's a really groundbreaking match, I feel, and light years ahead of what they would be doing in WCW until about the Nitro era. And U.S. wrestling, I think, really it was really good for the United States wrestling scene because I can imagine like a lot of people watch this and then grew up in the later 2000s to be like, okay, watching this match, watching the WCW cruiserweights, we're gonna kill it on the indies. And so like, you know, a lot of the wrestlers that you see coming through Ring of Honor in the early 2000s, Low Key, you know, Amazing Red, AJ Styles are you got to think they're all inspired by people like Brian Pillman and Jushin Liger and like later on the cruiserweights, Emily.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I know like people who are in wrestling school now or like recently went through wrestling school in California. A lot of the matches they were told to watch were like this, maybe not this match, but like the WCW cruiserweight stuff because it involves like high flying and technical wrestling. So I think this still is influential. It's definitely still influential today.
And let's get into the tail end of our episode here. But before we go, I want to know what do you feel about Liger retiring this coming January at the Wrestle Kingdom show? I think he's retiring on the January 5th show. That's what I've been hearing.
Yeah, that's what I've been hearing too. Oh man, I'm really sad. Like it seems like he should, especially because he's like a cartoon or it's easier to see him as like a character rather than like a human. It's like, oh, why can't you wrestle forever? But I think they've handled his retirement really well with him getting that last title shot and the feud with Suzuki that just brought back the great Jushin Liger reveal. And I feel like he's going to do something with Muta because they've interacted like a couple times this year. I feel like they've got to do something. That's just a hunch though. That's not facts. But I am looking forward to his last match. I'm sure it's going to be with like another junior. I hope it's with like Hiromu Takahashi. But I don't know. Or maybe it'll be a big tag or something, but I'm very sad he's retiring, but I think he's having like such a great last year.
Yeah, so is your guess is going to be he's going to do something with returning Hiromu Takahashi at Wrestle Kingdom for his retirement?
It's like a guess, but it's also I feel like he's gonna, if not Hiromu, I think another significant like younger junior heavyweight, and I feel like Ospreay's gonna be busy doing something else. I don't think they're gonna do ELP, and I don't know who else. I mean, maybe they could do like.
You know what my hope is?
Yeah, who do you think?
My hope is that it's Chris Jericho, but he's not Chris Jericho. He's Super Liger. He revives the Super Liger costume, and he wrestles Jushin Thunder Liger.
Dude, that would be incredible. Like old 2019 Chris Jericho as Super Liger. Oh my gosh.
He has to redeem himself because that one match he had as Super Liger was the absolute shits. But like, you know, get a little bit of the bubbly in Chris Jericho, and he's ready to go. Get a new, you know, costume that actually fits him this time. You know, and then, you know, he could take off his mask and he's like, you know, he's Kishin Jericho or something like that.
Oh my god. Okay. Oh man. Just thinking about like how hard Chris Jericho would go with Kishin Jericho, like that. Oh, that would be incredible. I hope that they don't do that because I think Jericho would overshadow Liger's retirement by being hilarious. But man, that's a really good idea.
I bet Liger, if he listened to this, he'd be like, "That's a good idea. let's call up Chris Jericho, see if he wants to do that with me.
Yeah.
Because he's totally, like, Liger is the most unselfish person probably in the history of wrestling. He doesn't care. Like, he wants people to get over on him. He wants to be able to elevate people and have people, like, get the rub from him. He doesn't necessarily need the rub from anybody else. So I think if you presented that to him, he'd be like, yeah, so just that I should do that. Yeah, for sure. But that's my wish, like, that I would see, like, the return of Super Liger in the form of Chris Jericho wearing that costume again, and maybe Kishin Jericho. That would be very interesting. But let's wrap it up there with our wish list. You have Hiromu, I have Chris Jericho for Liger's retirement. Emily, this time let's tell people, where can people find Emily Pratt?
Oh, people can find my writing for the most part on uproxx.com/pro wrestling. I do a review column, the best and worst of New Japan Pro Wrestling, and write about various other things. I also contribute to Deadlock Pro Wrestling, deadlockpw.com. If any issues of Mind Games magazines are out, or Mind Games magazine are out when this comes out and are not sold out, then I will have contributed to a very good magazine. And you can follow just all my projects, and if I'm ever on a podcast, on twitter.com/Emily of Pratt.
Yeah, like I said earlier, one of my favorite Twitter handles in wrestling Twitter. But I will say this, Emily, you can be a bit of a firebrand with some of your comments. And
I know.
People,
I know.
I don't care. Like, I read like what other people get angry about. I laugh. I'm like, well, it's not. It's like, I don't agree, but it's a different opinion. But it's like, I don't know why people are angry about this. It's like, it's like, people say shit about me. I don't care. Like, it doesn't bother me. It's like, okay, you have a different opinion than me. Okay, but like, we won't go into specifics. But I just want to let you know.
Spicy of a Twitter account, but I don't know. Occasionally, I have had some hot takes that people did not like, or comments that could have been worded in a nicer way. But it's mostly just talking about stuff in wrestling, and don't follow me to find someone getting into Twitter fights, because I mostly do not.
No, I'm not trying to suggest that you get Twitter fights, but sometimes you'll tweet something, and people I know, like, who I'm friends with, will get angry about it, and I'm like, what do you think? Like, we'll talk about this privately, and I'm like, she's got a different opinion. Like, I like her writing, so, like, what's your problem? Why did she say this about this person, or this point about something? I'm like, who cares? If you don't like it, don't follow her. Like you don't like half the things I say sometimes, and we're friends. It's like, anyways, I enjoy your Twitter. I just want to let you know, I support your Twitter. I enjoy your writing, and keep on doing it. I don't care if you make other people angry. It entertains me. Please keep doing it. That's all I want to say to you. That's all. So, anyways, thank you, Emily, so much for joining me on Thunderstruck. I really enjoyed talking with you. I hope we can do something in the future again. Please follow Emily on Twitter. Please follow her writings at all the different outlets that she mentioned in her plugs. And thanks to all the listeners for listening to this episode, and keep supporting Thunderstruck throughout the course of its run. And for Emily, I want to say, until I talk to you on the next episode, I will say goodbye.